This has haunted me for a long time. I was about 19 or 20 at the time, and I was living in Savannah, Georgia. I drank a lot, had a crappy fake ID, and I worked this terrible job as a grunt laborer. The kind where you go to those temp labor agencies like Able Body and Labor Finders. I'd show up at 4 a.m., work until 5 p.m., and drink myself to sleep after only taking home maybe $60 for the day. I was supposed to go into work this particular morning, but I decided to skip. It's a labor agency, so they'll just find somebody else. I call my girlfriend and tell her I want to go to the beach, Tybee Beach. I had already started drinking. She comes over and we hop in my big, ugly van, pack up some rods, and head to the beach. I decided to have a drink across from the beach at this little bar. Now this is where the story gets interesting. Shortly after ordering my drink, I get this really weird feeling. I become hyper-aware of my surroundings. The door opens and I see this guy walk in out of my peripheral vision. There was a seat between me and my girlfriend, but the bar was empty at like 9 a.m. and he could have sat anywhere else, yet he chooses to sit right between her and I. Then he starts doing this thing with his fingers. The bar top was reflective and he takes his fingers like two little legs and starts just walking with them, skating with them on the top of the counter. This isn't anything out of the ordinary, but I took notice because when I was in school, I did that all the time. I pretended to have rollerblades on my fingers and that I was skating around my desk. I hated school and was always distracting myself, so I became kind of mesmerized for some reason. That's when he looks at me, and in this really thick kind of Germanic or Nordic accent, he says, "I notice you're a man who pays attention to detail. I'm also a man who pays attention to detail." Now, before I continue, I have to describe this guy. He had this short, spiky hair that was bleached at the tips, kind of like a late 90s style. He had really expensive clothes on, like a nice Prada leather jacket, nice designer jeans, really nice boots. He seemed like kind of a gay guy with awesome fashion sense and really distinctive taste. I always remember this specifically because I think to myself, some weird homeless crazy guy couldn't have afforded those clothes. Anyway, the other thing that stuck out was his eyes. They were piercing gray. They reminded me of like a husky's eyes, but his pupils just stayed this disturbing pinpoint size. They were extremely small, which caused his look to be kind of terrifying. His teeth were normal, right? But not at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. They were sharper than they should be, as if they were slightly filed. His hands were normal too, but his fingernails, again, were slightly long and pointed, as if he had deliberately did it. He kept licking his teeth too, like he was salivating. The thing about this guy is that you look at him and everything seems normal, but off at the same time, so you're questioning if you're crazy for thinking this. This guy then begins to start talking about the relationship between me and my girlfriend, but really strangely. He's talking about how beautiful she is and how I should pay more attention to her. I was kind of a dick to her at the time. Shortly after he began talking like this, I had this almost knowing feeling come over me, like I knew this guy wasn't human. I look at my girlfriend and say, "You need to leave." She just kind of looks at me like she knows too, and without a word of protest, she gets up and quietly leaves. Later I learned that she went next door to get a coffee. That's when this guy literally says to me with the utmost confidence, "You were supposed to go fishing today." He points at the beach across the street. "If you had, I would have drowned you in that ocean." And I shit you not, he fucking hissed. Again, for some reason, this overwhelming calm had come over me. I just ask, "Who are you?" He answers back with this crazy guttural language and said something really long. It sounded Arabic or Hebrew or something. I just, for some reason, without skipping a beat, and I have no idea how I was so calm to this day, ask, "Say it in a way that I can understand." And he says, "You can call me Jimmy C. I jumped off the San Francisco Bridge years ago, and we've been watching you." From there on out, he never referred to himself as me or I, but only we. The conversation became something very strange after this. He was saying things like, "We see you taking a bath. We wish we too could feel the warmth of the water and the comfort of the steam," and other weird stuff like that. He kept buying me drinks too, specifically whiskey sours. It was like he had an endless supply of money. After I don't know how long, because I lost some sense of time, I told him I was going to leave. I walk next door, I get my girlfriend, and she's stone silent. We start driving home, don't say a word. Then I just ask, "Do you know what that was?" And she just says, "That was a demon." This girl had parents that were scientists. She was really analytical, completely non-religious, and that was the first thing she said. Now, I didn't say this part before because to me, this is the most important aspect of the story. This is what really screwed me up for fucking years. The last thing this Jimmy C guy said to me before I left is this: "Look at my car." I look outside and I see one of those newer Volkswagen Beetles. It was white. What does the license plate say? I look at the plate and it literally says, "Fierce." He looks me dead in the eyes and says, "The next time you see me, I'll be driving a black Mercedes, and the license plate will say, Utopia." Stupid, right? That night I was still calm. I don't know why, I felt like that guy on Office Space after his hypnotherapist died right in front of him and he was weirdly zen. But my girlfriend started having terrible nightmares of this guy's head just staring at her in her dreams. Weeks went by, and that's when the encounter started affecting me. I found myself becoming paranoid about that black fucking Mercedes. Every black car I saw, I checked if it was a Mercedes, and if it was, I immediately looked at the license plate. I started doing it when I watched TV or movies as well. I couldn't stop. Now I'm going to fast forward a bit. About 10 years go by. I'm 29, so this is just recently. And in silence, when I'm alone, when I'm drinking, I often think about this encounter. I still look at black Mercedes every time they pass, but I'm not so much anxious about it anymore, as just curious. And I remember that my girlfriend at the time always kept a journal. By now I'm pretty sure that I'm insane, maybe I was drunk, maybe I'm not remembering any of this correctly. After years of trying to find news articles of a Jimmy C that took their life off the San Francisco Bridge, looking at black cars and so on, I feel like I'd grown out of it. Still, I had to know. So last year I tracked down my ex-girlfriend. We ended on bad terms, and I find out that she's a school teacher in Wisconsin, has married a woman, and is actually trying to have a child. I figure she's not going to talk to me, but I send her a Facebook message anyways. I ask her if she can find the journal from that day because I have to know if her events line up with mine. Sure enough, she had it, and it contained even more detail than what I remembered, because she had literally written it at the coffee shop next door right after it happened. Here's what her account of the event said. Notes on what happened at Tybee Island, Georgia, on the first Tuesday in December 2005. Drove there during the day, and the sunshine was getting me down. Kept thinking about how earlier I had gone to my boyfriend's house after waking up there, and he woke up early, took a shower, came back and woke me up. Acted very sweet. Then I went home, took a shower, came back to go with him to Tybee, and he'd gotten drunk already and was teasing me, being sort of an ass. I even threatened to go home once, but I stayed, feeling that I really should go to Tybee with him. But I was excited to show Tybee to Will during the day since I knew it well, and he'd never seen it. He talked about how it all reminded him of his childhood as we drove through the salt marshes and over bridges, the sun, the palm trees. I'd grown up in fog. Got to Tybee and he wanted to get a couple of beers even though we had rum in the trunk. Well, really the back of the van. The first bar we went to carded Will, and so we left, remarking that everyone in the place had given us strange looks as soon as we walked in. Went over to Fanny's a couple of doors down, all in the area of the beach by the pier. I decided I didn't want beer after all and told the woman I'd just like a glass of water. My boyfriend had a PBR. It only cost $1. Noticed the Volkswagen Beetle White parked outside when I came in, but did not see Jimmy enter. Will pointed out a man sitting one stool down from me, drumming his fingers strangely on the stainless steel bar, more like dancing with his nails, stretching his long fingers. I immediately thought that he was gay. Will and I watched and talked in whispers about it for a few moments before he, the stranger, spoke. He first talked about how I had noticed him dancing with his nails, the words he used, then looked at his nails, surprised, and said they look like shit. I laughed, getting a weird feeling about the guy. He then spoke about how it's important to notice details and he likes it when people pay attention, that he pays attention to everything, that he knows that I do too. His eyes are some word that Will couldn't decipher in his retelling. Blue, gray, he has blonde hair and a narrow pointed nose above pale lips that cover crooked teeth. Not very white, almost like fangs. His teeth are all I can look at until I look him in the eye, something I normally won't do until I know a person at least a little, and he seems to evade me. He asks if I love my boyfriend, but doesn't use his name or mine. Without hesitation, I nod and say yes. He asks my boyfriend, "Do you love her?" And he looks uncomfortable, laughs a little bit, says, "Yeah, I guess so." Then the guy says that I am beautiful, that if my boyfriend won't love me unconditionally as I do him, someone else will. He touches my hair and says that I am a creature of God. He then tells us that he walked 3 miles up and down the beach and that it sucked, said something about God's green earth, told a story about a scorpion that asked a frog for a ride across the river, and then stung the frog, told the frog that it was in his nature, and then they both enjoyed their last minutes of life because they both would then die. He told Will he knew him and kept trying to get to him through me. He'd say, "I'm not hitting on you, girl," but continually told me I was beautiful. He tried to piss Will off, kept saying that he knew him, said he is in his room at night, that he crawls on his back. He told my boyfriend his glasses, the aviator sunglasses that I gave him, were cheap, and that my glasses were perfect because I see through them rather than trying to hide behind them. Then he said I was perfection, that I was one step away from becoming myself. Earlier he talked about fashion, thought my glasses might be Armani, said Prada was his favorite person. When I noticed that his orange leather jacket had a red rectangle of fabric on the left breast that said Prada. He said to my boyfriend Will that he knew who he was, to which Will replied that he knew who he was. The stranger left to go to his car to get money for more drinks. He'd offered to buy us all a shot of tequila and already bought Will a beer. As he walked out, he pointed to the license plate. His car was the white Beetle outside. The license plate read Fierce. While he was gone, Will asked me if I knew who the man was. I nodded, saying I had an idea. "Yeah, but you think you're crazy every time you think it, don't you?" Will said. I was thinking the man was the devil or something close. My girlfriend then wrote a couple of notes that she missed. When asked where he was from, he didn't answer. We thought he could have been from Tybee, but he said he didn't live there. Asked him where he lived and he just started talking about his other car, a Mercedes-Benz with a plate that said Utopia. Asked if he lived in his car and he said no, Utopia's doors are closed to me. Will asked him where he learned all he was talking about. He said he could speak 5 languages, English being the most important because it is trained, and often spoke a few sentences in a language I could not recognize. And he said he had lived in San Francisco, where he jumped off a bridge and died. That's the point where I had told my ex-girlfriend to leave. That's when he said he would have drowned me in the ocean, started referring to himself as we, and finally told me that the next time I would see him it would be in the black Mercedes. When I read what she had written, literally that day, I knew that I wasn't imagining the details wrong, that this actually happened. This is probably the single most frustrating and scary thing that has ever happened to me. I want to imagine it's just a normal crazy guy, but unless you saw it and felt it and heard him talk about all the little details of what you were supposed to do that day when only you knew it, you just can't understand the impact of it. It's been 10 years, and my only solace really is that my ex-girlfriend was there to corroborate. That communication where I reached out to her actually caused us to be on good terms again after a decade. It seems to have been something that bothered her just as much as it bothered me. And still to this day, even though I'm living 10,000 miles away in Southeast Asia, I can't stop looking for that car. I can't stop thinking about Jimmy C's twisted face. I wonder if he still crawls on my back, and if the fear I feel at night, often to where I must drink myself to sleep or find a one-night stand just so I don't feel alone, is him, or them, watching me. Clowns have become a mainstay of horror, and there are many sensible reasons for that. Masks are also a frequent subject in horror media after all, and anything that conceals our ability to recognize another person's face can be unnerving. This is at the root of the Uncanny Valley, and the recent Uncanny Valley predator theory. This theory proposes that in the ancient times of human history, before civilization came about, there was a predator that hunted humans by mimicking them, either a fellow hominid or possibly something else entirely. And this is given as an explanation for our instinctual fear of anything that appears almost human, but not quite. It's interesting to note that another theory for why clowns are so frightening rose to prominence in fringe conspiracy circles and religious-motivated communities around 2016, when the remake of Stephen King's It was about to be released, and the bizarre and still unexplained clown sightings were taking place across much of the world. The Nephilim are a group of evil mythological creatures from the Bible, described as being the illegitimate children of fallen angels called the Watchers and humankind. Their moral corruption would later lead to the global flood event that Noah escaped from on his ark. Many believe that they have an appearance similar to clowns, and there are a couple of encounters throughout history that might back this up. The Paiute tribe of Nevada in the United States describe being hunted by a fellow tribe in one of their legends, characterized by immense height, red hair, and in some variations of the story, pale faces. This mysterious tribe was known as the Sitaka, and the Paiute described them as cannibals who liked to wear bones as jewelry. Their oral history also mentions the Sitaka being exterminated at a final battle with the Paiute near Lovelock Cave. Whether this is historical fact or fiction is incredibly murky, and the Sitaka's existence is also debated, with some believing them to be a tribe that preceded the Paiute in the area, and others believing them to be entirely mythical. Some people of the Paiute tribe embellish the Sitaka with supernatural aspects, such as a giant size beyond that of human scope, or immense predatory cruelty. Across the pond in the United Kingdom in 1973, 2 children playing near a river next to Lake Common, Sandown, would describe an encounter with a 7-foot-tall, pale white individual named Sam the Clown. They said that he was speaking while barely moving his lips, and had a bizarre appearance with no visible neck and triangles for eyes. Sam brought them into his home, a metallic hut where he spoke with them and ate berries by putting them through his ear. Another giant with a clownish appearance can be found in Cormac McCarthy's mythologized version of Judge Holden in Blood Meridian, whose pale white face and supernatural aptitude have him stand out as something distinctly inhuman. Even though the supposedly real account of the actual Holden by Samuel Chamberlain describes him as having normal cream-colored skin, the judge still retains his monstrous height, incredible intelligence, and predatory behavior towards children. Finally, there's the Giant of Kandahar, a gigantic beast with red hair that U.S. Special Forces allegedly encountered and killed in Afghanistan in 2002. Theorists also believe that the flamboyant and jester-like clothes that celebrities and royal families wear may be channeling the energy of these dark beings. Clowns are an interesting facet of humanity, sometimes lighthearted and sometimes incredibly morbid, like the court fools who rode into medieval battle to mock their army's slaughtered victims. So this theory fits right in with their ever so bizarre history. For those of you who have never heard of it, the Devil's Tramping Ground, or Devil's Circle, is one of the most famous haunted locations in the United States. It's located in North Carolina on the forested outskirts of Siler City in Bear Creek County. Off the road and into the woods here, there's a perfect 40 by 40 foot dirt circle on the ground where nothing grows, despite the fact that it's surrounded by grass and trees in every direction. It's also been surrounded by local legends since the early 1700s, the most famous of which states that the devil himself stomps around the circle past midnight during the witching hours, which creates the odd tramping sound that gives the place its name. People who've stayed overnight have claimed that they've had items that they've camped with thrown outside of the circle, and some have even allegedly fallen asleep inside the circle and woken up at morning to find themselves placed outside of its diameter by some unknown force. Scientists have been taking soil sample from the dirt for decades, but they still haven't been able to come up with an explanation as to why it's completely barren, despite the otherwise surrounding fertile ground. And one of the oldest known theories, in a tired but true-to-life horror trope, states that the circle is actually the legendary burial ground of the Native American chief that was referred to in the missing Roanoke settlers' final message, Croatoan. So it's got a lot of history. Anyways, here's my own personal experience. My sister and I were staying in North Carolina with our extended family. When I first arrived, I had bought a book of North Carolina's ghost stories from a local pharmacy and was surprised to see the Devil's Tramping Ground listed within its pages. I had definitely read about it online, but had never really cared to research where it actually was in the States. And it turned out it was only an hour drive from where my sister and I were staying in the city of Durham. This particular night, we were at a dinner party with family friends, and we spent most of it trying to convince one of the partygoers, who was the same age as us, to visit the Devil's Circle for the first time with us after the party. They eventually refused to go, saying that they had drank too much, but we both knew that that was bull. We had been watching them the entire night, and they hadn't drank any more than usual, not to mention I was the one who was driving, so it shouldn't have mattered in the first place. They were scared, and so were we. Being paranormal enthusiasts, my sister and I had visited the odd supposedly haunted woods and barren camping grounds, but we had never really been to one of the pillars of American paranormal horror, and we were about to go. It seemed like the party was to wrap up at midnight, so we would reach the circle at around 1 a.m., when the activity was at its peak. Everyone said their goodbyes, and my sister and I got into our car. It was foggy out, so we had to go a little slower than usual. After about 50 minutes of dull highway, we got off onto the road leading to Siler City, and this was where the scenery started becoming foreign to us. My sister and I had grown up and stayed in New York City for most of our lives, so the sight of the North Carolinian country, long starlit pastures dotted with solemn farm equipment, and the odd silo or windmill, was really like another planet to us. Not to mention, Siler City has to be the smallest city I've ever seen. It really looked more like a gas station and a couple of surrounding buildings, but to the top right was the titular Devil's Tramping Ground Road. Yes, that's really what it's called. It's a long road that goes past more farmland, with the circle itself being to the left 2 miles in. When we finally found it, which took a couple of drives back and forth because the gate is hidden deep within the trees on the side of the road. Side note, but we actually had to resort to my sister shining a large flashlight we brought out her window until we found it. But anyways, when we finally found it, we got to the gate, which isn't rustic. It's a modern red metal with no trespassing sign, but we were easily able to slip in around the sides, which are left exposed. In the center of the circle, it was dead quiet. Really seemed like a place from another world to us. I had read stories about people finding odd objects and rituals being performed there, but we were alone that night, surrounded only by the borders of the dead circle and the trees beyond it shifting slowly in the wind, and the most magnificent stars I've ever seen in my entire life. I started to hear dogs barking in the distance, far out into the depths of the forest that bordered the circle. My sister and I were frozen in place looking at the stars, so I didn't pay much attention to it. Plus, I really needed to pee, so I drifted off into the distance, further into the forest. I heard the dogs again. Closer now because I was closer to the forest. Or maybe they were coming in our direction? I couldn't really tell. I finished peeing and walked back to my sister. Again, the dogs were barking. They were definitely moving towards us. I was a little worried because there was a lot of private property in the area, and it might be one of the landowners coming over to chew us out. But they still sounded like they were deep within the forest. So I just went back to looking at the stars. We definitely had at least 20 minutes before they ended up reaching us. My sister and I immediately looked at each other. We had both heard it, a painful roar from deep inside the forest. I couldn't say what animal it was. I've never heard anything like it. Not in the real world, on the internet, or on TV. It certainly wasn't anything that belonged in North Carolina. It was profoundly loud and guttural, like the creature's vocal cords were made of metal and scraping against each other. "Let's get back into the car," my sister said. We hurried away, taking a quick last glance at the Devil's Circle and the stars. Then we were in the car, driving down Devil's Tramping Ground Road in the fog. "What was that animal?" I asked. "I don't know," my sister said. She seemed excited, but at the same time a little uneasy. "Do you think it was roaring because those dogs were making so much noise?" "What dogs?" I paused. There was no way my sister hadn't heard them. They were getting louder and louder the whole time we were there. "Those dogs that were barking at us," I said. "I didn't hear any dogs." And with that, my sister turned her head and fell asleep. It was around 1:30 in the morning by the time we left the circle, so we were both very tired. But I had a long drive ahead of me, so I put on some music and drove on. It was only 2 minutes later, right when I turned off of Devil's Tramping Ground Road and passed the gas station in Siler City, that I nudged my sister awake. "What?" she groggily asked. I pointed out the window. "Look." There was a shadowy figure in the middle of the road. I swerved to dodge it, and as we passed it to the right, the headlights made clear what it was. A massive, hunched dog. Its back must have been up to our car door mirrors. It was the size of a wolf, but I knew it wasn't one. It had downward-sloped ears like a docile beagle, and patches of gray, black, and white fur sticking out all over it. It was bone-thin, to the point where I could see its indented ribs pressing up against the skin of its belly. The worst part was its head. It had a sharp snout like a husky, and its mouth was gaping open, like it was smiling. It was so wide it seemed like it was just barely hanging on to the hinges of its jaw. And its eyes, they were stark white with no pupils. It looked directly at us as we passed. In the car door mirror, I could see its rear. It had no tail. We were both absolutely frozen, and neither of us talked for the rest of the country road that led away from Siler City. But the minute we got onto the highway, my sister turned to me and said, "I think that was a demon." Be 16. Be black and have family down in Alabama. They farm and own a huge amount of land down in Huntsville. Uncle owns a big house and a bunch of trailers they put out in the woods for hunting or camping. Down south cousins suggest that we go out there to camp. Know I'm a city kid from Chicago, so they tease the fuck out of me. Collect food, kill a pig and some chickens, and bring necessities to camp out for a few days. We get to the camp and it's obvious something is weird. Air has this weird electric smell like right before a storm, like ozone. We think nothing of it and unpack and go down to a little creek to swim for a few hours. All of a sudden, some older white guy and a white teenager come out of the bushes. He has a shotgun in the crook of his arm and says hello and asks us what we're doing this far back in the woods. Tell him about my uncle, who he knows, and say we're camping out. He tells us we need to be real careful out here and stick together because there was a big animal in the woods. His son, who is my age, asks if he can stay and hang out with us. He says okay. I'm going to stop green texting because the story is fairly long and the format is harder to write in. So we end up playing football. Dicking around with me, there's the white kid Tanner, 5 of my cousins, and then 4 of their friends. In total, there were 5 girls and 6 boys. We were all around 15 to 17 and we ended up just dicking the day away. Eventually we head back to the camp and pull out some stuff for a campfire, even though the trailers both had kitchenettes. Tanner says that his family's property sits up against my uncle's. He wants to run home and ask his dad if he can come out camping with us. My cousin Rooster says he's going to go with him since it's going to get dark soon. One of the girls also wants to tag along. It's about 7 o'clock and it's starting to get pretty dark. They grab flashlights and take the trail towards Tan's property. The rest of us chill. We make s'mores, drink, and kiss on the girls. About 30 or 40 minutes later, there's the smell of ozone again. You could notice it over the scent of the fire we had started, this really nasty, coppery smell, like right after you've had a nosebleed and it stopped. It wasn't exactly like dried blood, but it was that metallic back-of-your-throat smell. We immediately think that it's some kind of electrical malfunction, or that someone left a hot plate on or some shit. We search the trailers and nothing's on, but we can all smell it. All of a sudden, we can hear people booking it down the path towards us. Rooster, Tan, and the girl all come running into the clearing, out of breath. And they don't even break stride, they all run into the trailer, right by where the fire is. We all get the fuck out of there and into the trailers. They end up calming down, even Rooster is crying his fucking eyes out at this point. All the while, the fire is guttering lower and lower, so my cousins say fuck it and are about to go outside to get the generator out of a shed between the trailers. Tanner goes, "Fuck no. Lock the front door, ain't nobody else going outside." He's been crying too. His eyes are bloodshot and puffy, and his pants are dirty as shit. He goes on to tell us that they went up to his house. His father said sure, he could go out camping, but to make sure they were careful on the way back, and that maybe they should take one of the hunting rifles just in case. Evidently, Tanner had seen something in their yard a few days before. One of their pigs had been ripped up and half eaten. They assumed it was just some big cats or coyotes, even though they don't usually fuck with live animals. Tanner went upstairs, packed his stuff, and told his dad they would be okay without the rifle, because coyotes avoid people, when they started walking back toward where we were camping. Rooster finally stops crying and shaking. The girl already had, but was now just staring out the window with a dumb look on her face. He says they had gotten halfway into the woods towards the camp when they started to hear shit in the forest. It was almost pitch black by this time, so they weren't sure at first what the fuck it was. The girl says she heard something in the bushes right off the trail. They all beamed their flashlights over there, and there was someone standing in the woods in a little hollow. Rooster said they shouted at him and told the guy he was scaring the fuck out of them and what a dick he was. He says that's when he realized that the guy was facing away from them. They keep walking, and they start smelling the nasty coppery ozone smell. They say that they look off into the forest on the opposite side, and there's a dude standing there too, backward, slightly closer to the path. So now they start power walking and Tan keeps going. I should have taken the fucking rifle. As they're telling the story, the smell is still super strong, even inside the cabin. They say that after they started walking faster, a kind of low gibbering had begun coming from both sides of the wood. As they booked it back to the trailer, the girl said she flashed her light out to the side of them and saw something jerking through the woods. The gibbering just got louder and louder, and when they could see the light from our campfire, something had come out of the woods about 40 yards behind them into the track. Then they just flat out ran as hard as they could to the trailer. So we're out in the fucking woods, and we're assuming at this point it's some rednecks or some shit trying to fuck with us. All of a sudden, my other cousin, Junior, starts going on about how he went to school with a native kid that was telling him about the goat man or some shit. We promptly tell him to shut the fuck up because we don't need any spooky talk right now. But he just keeps going on and on about how it's the fucking goat man and how we're in the middle of his woods and blah blah blah. At the time, I had never heard of this goat man or any of that. But then a couple of years ago, the year before I graduated from college, I had met him for a roommate, and I ended up asking him about it. To sum it up, it's basically a fucking man with the head of a goat, and he can shapeshift and get among groups of people to terrorize them. It's supposed to be some kind of like Wendigo, but it's bad mojo to even talk about, and even worse if you see it. Keep in mind, I didn't know this back when I was 16, so my cousin is going, the goat man's going to get in and fucking get us. The girls are all terrified, and my cousins and I are fucking trying to figure out if it's just some hillbillies or an animal. All of a sudden, the smell just goes away. To this day, I haven't even experienced anything like it. Obviously, smells usually fade away or lessen, but it was literally just there 1 second, and then not there the next. So it's after an hour, making it around 9 or 10. We've stopped shitting bricks enough to go back outside and stoke the fire again. We figure it was just some assholes trying to fuck with us, so we don't go back home, because we think if we do, they'll chase us through the woods or some crazy shit. Nothing else happens that night. We stay another night, and for the main part of that night, nothing happens. But at about 1 in the morning, we're outside getting drunk and telling ghost stories. As someone is finishing some too spooky story, I don't remember what about, the smell comes back. It's so fucking strong that one of the girls literally starts vomiting. I stand up and you can actually feel how clammy the air is. I say we should get inside and that this isn't right. We should have just fucking left. We all go back inside and we're standing around. My cousin keeps going on about how it's the goat man. My other cousin Rooster tries to shut him the fuck up, and all the while, I'm just feeling that something is wrong and I can't figure out what the fuck it is. We end up sitting in there for a while. The smell is just as strong, and we're terrified and all huddled in this camper. We end up cooking brats for everybody because nobody wants to go outside. It's one of those packs with 4 brats. We have a total of 3 packs. I grill them up on the stove and give everybody a hot dog, then get mine. After a while, one of my cousins gets up and goes over to the pot to get another one. He starts grumbling about how I got 2 brats and everybody else only got 1, and I look at him like he's fucking stupid. I tell him that everybody only got 1 because there were only 12 brats, and that if he wanted more, he should just open up a new pack and cook some more. That's when the girl that had been out with Rooster and Tan just starts screaming, "Oh Jesus, oh Lord, get it out." She's crying and shivering, and then it dawns on the cousin standing up what the fuck is wrong. Me and him both glance around the room, and I feel my heart fucking sink. I run the fuck out of the cabin, and the girl runs with us. The trailer door is banging against the side of the trailer as everybody books it out. One of my cousin's friends asks us what the fuck was wrong. I start counting us. There's only 11 now. I shit you not, my cousin verified. There had been 12 people in the cabin. But being that everybody didn't really know each other well, nobody had noticed the whole fucking time that there was an extra person. And then I realized earlier that I had kind of noticed something was off. You know when you're just dicking around, having a good time, that you don't sweat all the small shit, and you don't always keep track of certain stuff? I'm dead sure that someone else had been in the trailer with us, and that they had been there for at least a fucking day, eating with us. What makes it worse is I couldn't figure out who it was, because I don't think anyone ever actually interacted with the other person, or the goat man. The girl kept praying to Jesus, and we're all sitting outside. Eventually we get big-ass sticks and go back in the cabin, but there's nobody in there. We count again, and there's 11 people. We go back into the trailer and lock the door. We explain what the fuck happened. The girl says that she realized too, and that when she was about to say something, the person sitting next to her had grabbed her leg hard, leaned over toward her, and said something she couldn't understand. So we are pretty much scared as fuck, and we huddle together, and I fall asleep. When I wake up, the sun is just coming up, and half the people are asleep and the other half are packing our shit up. We all want to walk back home, but like 4 people want to stay until the sun is all the way up. And some people actually think we're just fucking around and still want to stay at the trailers. I just want to get the fuck out of the woods. The girl's name was Kira, the one that the goat man had touched. Anyways, I asked her if she really thinks it was something bad, and she just says she wants to go home, and that she doesn't want to be out in the woods alone for another night. So we decide to split up. The 4 that want to go can go, but I have to stay because I have the keys to the cabin, and it's my uncle's and I have to lock up. I'm super pissed at this point because I feel like people aren't taking this shit seriously, and I definitely didn't want to be out in the woods for another night. I spend the rest of the day trying to convince the rest of the people, now 4 girls and 4 guys, to get the fuck out of Dodge. Tanner leaves with them to go get a rifle and he says he's going to be back, so there are just 7 of us left by 4 p.m. At around 5 p.m., he hasn't made it back yet, and we're getting extremely fucking antsy. The only reason I stopped begging them to leave was because he went to get a gun. At about 5:30 p.m., the one cousin that did stay says that the girl Kira is outside. We all look outside, and sure enough, she's standing by the fire pit with her back to the cabin. I'm thinking to myself, if she was so fucking scared, why the hell would she come back? And then I get this nasty feeling in my gut. Keep in mind, the whole time, the coppery smell has gone. Now I realize I can smell just a twinge of it. I say this to the rest of them. Everybody, and these are the people that wanted to stay in the fucking woods after we had the goddamn goat man in our midst, is laughing at me and asking if I set this up to scare them. I'm looking at them like, I'm not fucking bullshitting you all right now. I ask them why the fuck would I play like that. So one of the girls goes outside to get Kira. She gets halfway to her and stops cold. Kira starts heaving. I don't know how the fuck to describe it. Sort of like if someone with their back turned was laughing without actually making any sound. It was this fact that made me realize there was not a fucking sound in the whole woods. It was dead silent. This was late September, so it was still fairly hot at the time, but super chilly some days too. And you could usually hear big-ass geese honking or some kind of birds or squirrels chit-chatting. I step out of the door and tell the girl to come back in the fucking trailer right goddamn now. She backs up into it and we lock the fucking door. We pull down all the shades except one and put a guy there in a chair to watch Kira, quote unquote. She stands there for another 20 minutes or so. Eventually the guy turns to say that she's still there, and there's a huge fucking bang on the door. We all jump the fuck up and scramble around the living room of the trailer. The banging is super fucking loud. My cousin is holding one of the girls, the other 2 are kinda giggling with nervous laughter, and me and the other 2 guys are shitting bricks. Then we hear Tan. He's screaming, "Let me the fuck in, stop fucking playing." We go over to the door and open it, and he stumbles in with a rifle. There's nobody else outside. Evidently, he had walked up to the campsite. Nothing weird happened in the forest, but he had seen a girl. Mind you, he said it was not Kira standing there, but when he had gotten to the edge of the clearing, she had turned toward him with a slack-jawed look and just stared him down, slowly tracking him as he walked around the outside of the clearing towards the camp. He said it wasn't until he was almost halfway to the trailer that he'd realized she was getting closer to him. She had started off by the fire, and without him even seeing her move, she had been turning, inching closer. He said he just ran the rest of the way back to the cabin, thinking it would open. When he got to the door and it was locked, he turned and it was about half the distance to the door. He looks around the room and then gets super pale. He pulls me to the side and whispers in my ear, "You know there are only 7 of us in here, right?" I get that feeling where your stomach drops to your nuts. It had been back inside the trailer while we were sorting out who was going where, and then when we all went outside to talk earlier in the day, it just slipped right back in. We look out the window and there's nobody there. So we recount, and then I go over and ask everybody how many people were here earlier, and everybody says 8. I say, well, how many are here now? They all do the count and realize there are now only 7 people in the cabin. Tan had brought back a couple boxes of ammo in his rifle. He told his dad that there was some kind of animal in the forest because he didn't think he would believe him if he said it was the goat man. He says that his cousin is supposed to be coming down in a few hours and that in the morning we can all go back to his place and his cousin will drive us home. Now I'm really fucking terrified, but I at least feel better because we can be American and shoot the fuck out of whatever it is if it comes back. But then my cousin gets into this huge argument with one of the girls because she thinks that I'm trying to be funny and prank them. She's getting really scared and thinks I'm not funny. He keeps telling her I'm not that kind of person, and she says, "Well, how do we know the girl wasn't just Tanner in a wig? Or if it's really the goat man, how do we know that this is the real Tanner and that goat man just didn't kill Tanner in the woods and take his gun?" So we get into a huge fucking argument about this, where me and Tan are like, we could seriously be in danger because at the very least someone has been sneaking themselves into our fucking trailer without us knowing and mingling with us. And at worst, something bad is in the forest fucking with us. One of the girls is crying and saying she wants to go right now, and we're trying to tell her we shouldn't because none of us are walking through the woods in the middle of the night. At this point, the sun is starting to go down, and it's getting a little cloudy out. We eat something and turn on the radio for a while, but we can't really get a station out there with anything decent. So we turn it off at about the time that Tan's cousin shows up. He was like 19, I think. Now the sun is just barely over the horizon, and he has one of those heavy-duty lantern flashlights and another rifle. He walks up to the trailer and we whisper to Tan, asking if he's sure that's his cousin. He says yes. The guy looks behind him and all around the camp, then walks in. He kind of glances at all of us and looks a little confused. Then he says, "Where's your other little buddy at? I figured she would meet me up at the cabin. Is she a little slow or something?" He also asked whether we had been cooking blood in the cabin because it smelled like blood in hot pans all the way up the trail. We were all like, fucking nope. We asked him what the fuck he's talking about with the girl he saw. He had come down the same trail Tan had been using and found one of you guys' buddies standing in the middle of the trail, looking at him slack-jawed. He had asked her a bunch of questions, but all she did was just look at him. Then she smiled, and he said he kept walking. She couldn't seem to keep up with him, and kept lagging a little behind. He said he asked her if she was hurt or something, and if she needed any help, but she had continued to stare. Eventually, he turned around a bend in the trail, but when he went back out to see if she was okay, the trail was empty. He'd assumed she had taken some shortcut through the woods to our trailer. We tell him the whole story of what's been going on. I half expected him to say we were full of shit, but he just listened and then sat down on the couches in the living room. Tanner's cousin gets back to the girl. He says that when she had kept trying to lag behind him, it had kinda weirded him the fuck out, so he tried to keep her in front of him. But no matter how slow he walked, she was always lagging a little behind. He smelled this nasty smell, and it got stronger as he got to the camp. Eventually it got really strong. She had said something really low that he didn't catch, and when he had turned around, she had been right the fuck up on him. He stepped back from her. It was at this point that he asked her if she was okay. If she wasn't, he offered to carry her back the rest of the way. She just kept staring. He said he reached out for her, as in to grab her on the shoulder, but he must have misjudged the distance because she was off to the side of where he had put his hand, like she had moved while he was looking dead at her. So at this point, we know this shit's real, unless Tan is playing a joke, which we can tell he's not because he's almost pissing his pants. They load up their rifles, we eat some more, and we just kind of sit around until about 11. To this fucking day, every time I think about this, I really pray to God that it's some huge prank that my cousins played on me and just never revealed, so I would shit myself for the rest of my life. At around 11, the stink of copper turned into an actual gross blood-like smell, like cooked blood and singed hair. Tan and his cousin Reese got the fuck up instantly and grabbed the rifles. There's like a half knocking, half clawing at the door, and I shit you not, there's this voice. It sounds like when you see those YouTube cats and dogs whose owners teach them to talk. It says in this halting, weirdly toned voice, "Let me the fuck in. Stop playing." It made my fucking nuts creep up against my body, and one of the girls just starts crying and calling for Jesus. It was so fucking obviously not a person talking. It didn't have the right cadence. That's some shit that I never realized until that moment, but all people have a certain cadence when they talk, no matter what language. All people have a certain kind of rhythm when talking. This shit didn't have any kind of cadence or rhythm. One of those YouTube cats, that's what the fuck it sounded like outside the door. So now I'm in full-on terror mode. We keep yelling outside, "Who is it? Stop fucking around, man." And it just keeps saying, "In," or "let me the fuck in," for almost 15 minutes. Then the smell goes away for a while, and for the next hour or so you can hear someone basically creeping around in the woods and shit. Every couple minutes it comes back to the door and says something. Finally the smell fades away at around 2 in the morning. Reese says, "Man, fuck this," opens the door and walks outside with his rifle. He fires a shot into the air and says something to the effect of, "In the name of Jesus Christ, go away." He fires 2 more times, and then from the woods right up against the river across from the trailer, it sounds like something is slowly gibbering and hooting. Then it starts screaming, and it sounds almost like a woman and a cat in a bag screaming together. Like I seriously have never heard any shit like that. We can hear the brush over that way start to shake. Reese fires over into the tree line and then starts backing up into the building. We lock the door, and we can hear this shit keening and screaming. Reese says something had come out of the bushes, super low to the ground, and was crawling towards the cabin. He had shot at it. Pretty much that's how the rest of the night went. Literally constant screaming for the next 2 hours and shit moving out in the tree line. But it never came back up to the cabin until everyone had finally fallen asleep. Tan had been sitting in the chair watching the door with his rifle. Nobody else heard or saw this, and he told me 2 days later, after the whole thing was over. He said he had been nodding off after the screaming and noises finally stopped. He'd been almost asleep when he saw someone come out of the bathroom and then lay down in the middle of the floor and go to sleep. He just assumed it was one of us and that the guy had nodded off. Then he said he kind of realized something was wrong, and while pretending to be sleeping, he counted us. There were 9 people in the cabin. He didn't want to try to shoot the fucking thing and have it kill us all then and there, or have Reese wake up and start shooting us and us kill ourselves. So he just stayed awake all night, pretending to be asleep. He said sometimes it would stand up and kind of do this weird jittery thing, or heave like it was laughing, but then it would lay back down. The story closes pretty weak because, from my perspective, nothing happened. When we woke up, I noticed that Tan was a little jittery, and that he was avoiding looking at all of us. But we ate some breakfast, packed up, and started walking to his house. He stayed last in the cabin and said he'd lock up and bring me my uncle's keys. He told us to just start walking and that he'd catch up, which I didn't really want to fucking do. We got a little bit up the path, and when he came running up, we just jogged back to his house. His cousin took us home. There was a window in the bathroom. Tan had gone to lock up and looked in there. We were too stupid to lock a screenless window, and it was fucking up when he went in there. I'm guessing it had been doing that all along, waiting for us to fall asleep or slip up and then getting in among us. It walked with us all the goddamn way back to his house, and then he said it lagged to the back of the group and looked him dead in the eyes before walking into the woods.
When looking at old mythical creatures, it's often hard to really respect how terrified our ancestors were of them. They appear in tapestries and ancient stories in a way that just seems dated. Sure, at the time I bet they were really scary, but in the modern day they can't really compete with what our artists are coming up with. This is not the case with the 18th century Scottish fairy tale monster, the Nuckelavee. The Nuckelavee is described as a sea monster, and while it's under the waves, it has a shape that nobody's seen, and we can imagine nobody would ever want to see. However, when it comes on land to steal children and curse its inhabitants, as the most malicious fairies tend to do, it takes a different form. The Orkney Islands are where the legend of the Knucklevi originated from, and from the island's records, we get our supposed real-life encounters with the beast. Many islanders have described seeing a dull red glow before encountering the creature stomping around at night, and the descriptions they've given are harrowing. It's like a centaur, a human torso stitched onto a horse's body, but the horse's front legs are torn off, and the torso's arms droop all the way down to the ground to replace them. Its head is massive, with a gaping mouth that's been compared to a whale, and a pig-like nose. The creature is also entirely flayed and skinless, with pus filling bloody veins lining its entire body that has a black bile constantly gushing through them. Somewhere in its fleshy exposed muscle, the dull red glow emanating from it also exposes a red reptilian eye. The beast's breath was so toxic that it was often blamed whenever local crops were wilting, or illnesses were spreading through the archipelago. The Knucklevi has frightened the people of the Orkney Islands so much that it's often considered the most evil being in their native Orcadian mythology. It's common to say a prayer after saying its name out of fear that it might appear, and the etymology of the first part, Nuck, can be traced back to Nick. Some believe this is in reference to Old Nick, a common name for the Christian devil.
I'll start by saying that I think there's something foundational for people, especially people who grew up in a rural or suburban area, not in the city. There's something foundational about your local woods, and that was certainly the case for me. And it officially starts when I was 12 years old, but I'll tell you about when I was 7. And to get the orientation of the woods, I'm going to put a map graphic up on screen because the woods are very large and there's a lot of facets to this. But basically, parallel to the woods at the bottom is a public park, and I was sitting on the park on the swings with my friend who we'll call the Muscle. I'm going to be using pseudonyms. I don't know why. I don't think my friends would care about anonymity, but it makes it seem a bit more, 80s Stephen King. So this was my friend the Muscle and I, and we were just swinging on the swings. And we saw a silvery disc kind of object just float down into the tree line of the woods. Really could have been anything, being logical. Could have been a balloon. Could have been, could have been a trick on our eyes, but of course to us, UFO. So that's where it kind of starts. But the first really strange thing happened when I was 12 years old. So there's the woods there, it's kind of a central point of the town. Underneath there's the park. Both the park and the woods are vertically parallel to a golf course that always seemed to be under construction. I'm sure if I went back to my hometown now, it would still be under construction. So since like 75% of this golf course was under construction and torn to bits, with just a bunch of junk strewn about it, my friends and I called it the Scrap Wasteland, and it was private. So one day, in winter, my friends and I decided to hop the fence to the Scrap Wasteland. It was a beautiful snowy day out, and it was just this kind of, tarred up, varnished land, this snowy plains with bits of metal sticking out from the ground every which way. We were just walking, just having a bit of a day, and then we came upon this tree, and the tree was dried out like everything else in the Scrap Wasteland. But what was odd was that there was like stalks of dried corn hanging from the branches of this tree, like someone had purposefully gone around the tree in a circle and tied bits of corn to it, and they were just there swaying in the wind, this dried corn. We were just kind of looking at it, puzzled. And my cousin, who was a bit of a wild man, or at that time wild 12 years old, 12-year-old, still a bit wild. But he tore one of the pieces of the corn out, and he just looked at us and said, "Fuck it," and started eating it. And in my mind, I was a huge horror guy. I was big into fantasy sci-fi, so immediately my mind went, "Oh, cursed. He's cursed." But I'm his family, and a curse is also kind of epic, so I decided I can't let my cousin get cursed and not place that on myself. That would just make me a bad cousin. So I also tore a piece of corn off the tree and started to eat it. And then the rest of our friends followed suit. And we were all just standing there on this private wasteland, eating this dried corn together. And I was 12 years old. Fast forward 4 years. So I'm 16, I'm in high school. And I'm with another friend, let's call him Bubba. And Bubba and I are just walking through the streets of the town together at night. And the town is weird, okay? Because the town is like orange streetlights at night, 6 p.m., everybody's in their house, no one goes outside. So Bubba and I were feeling a bit secluded. We're just walking through the streets of our empty town under these orange ambient streetlights. And we see the entrance to the woods from the town coming up, because the woods has several entrances. Like I said, it's kind of a central point of the town. And so we say, you know what, let's just go into the woods at night. This wasn't odd or uncommon for us. The woods at night always felt like the biggest adventure that you could have in the town. So we started to go into the woods. And there are houses on a row up to the entrance of the woods on either side of the street. And on the house that was closest to the entrance, right next to the entrance, when we passed by it, we started to hear this music. And it was like this kind of opera music, but it sounded like it was coming from a record player. And the record player was a bit broken or something, so it was scratchy. It was like... That's terrible. Yeah, I was like breaking up, like... But yeah, terrible. I gotta find like a sound effect or something to throw in there. Otherwise, I'm not gonna be able to do that repeatedly. But anyways, so we heard that, and the only thing going through our mind was, sucks for those people that their record player is broken. And so we entered the woods. And now let me describe the path of the woods. The woods had a circular path. So from our entrance from the town, and any other entrance, you go in, you walk around. Eventually, after a while, you'll find yourself back at that entrance, unless you take some of the inner paths, which we'll get to later. So we go in onto the circular path, and we go about 20% of the way through, and there are some benches there. It's kind of like a rest stop. So we're there on the benches, just sitting, and eventually Bubba says to me, "Hey, do you hear that? That sounds like the music." "What music?" "Oh, like the music that we were hearing at the entrance of the woods." I'm like, Bubba's either pulling my chain or he's spooking himself out. So I'm like, that's impossible. We're way into the woods now. And so Bubba's just kind of like, okay, I guess it's impossible. So we walk. We get halfway through the woods, the 50% mark. And this point is like an open field that parallels a road. And across the road, there is a private preserve. So we're in this open field, and we're walking, and both of us just stop, because now we both hear the music. But logically, if this music had somehow traveled all the way to where we were, it should have been coming from the direction we just came from the path we had been walking the entire time, since that was where the house was. But it wasn't. It was coming from the complete opposite direction of the woods. Bubba and I looked at each other, and we were like, nope, not dealing with that. And we started to run because this was scary. Like this made no logical sense to us. So we were running, and the music when we were running sounded like, like steps behind us. Like it was getting louder and louder, chasing us. Like it didn't want us to get away. And we ran all the way back through the freaking woods, and we got out onto the town, and it didn't stop. But we were calmer on the streets of the town, obviously, because we weren't there dead at night in the woods. But this music was still there, and it would now be like dancing from one side of the street to the other. It would be there, over there behind a house, and then it would be at the end of the street. And we were too scared to even approach it, so we were just like, let's take the closest path back to my house. And we did. So we got back to my house, avoiding the music as best as we could, but it was still like circling us like some kind of bird of prey. So that was that night, 16 years old. The next day, I call my friend who, let's call him Care Bear, because I know that that's going to piss him off if he ever hears this. So I call Care Bear and I say, listen, Care Bear, there is some weird, like, grave encounters, because that was his favorite movie at the point, shit happening in the woods. You want to come hang out so we can go? So Care Bear came over to my house, and the two of us just walked over and entered the woods from the town entrance again. And so we're walking, nothing's happening. We pass the benches, the rest stop, nothing happens. And we get all the way around 50% of the way again into the open field. And we hear it. But now it's not coming from that direction, from the opposite direction as it was the other night. Now it's coming from behind us, across the fence to the golf course, or the scrap wasteland. And that is like, the 50% mark is a straight path from the fence, basically. So we can almost see it. So we walk over to the fence, and we get down on our hands and knees, and we're just peeking through, looking in the direct path to where this music should have been coming from, right at this tree in the scrap wasteland. Not the same tree as the corn. That would just be too much. But we're looking at this other tree in the scrap wasteland, and we don't see anything. But that is literally where this music is coming from. Keep in mind, this time the music was like singing, like this light singing, similar to the night before, but it wasn't as distorted. So we just hop the fence, because, that's the logical next step, and we start walking across the scrap wasteland to investigate. And all of a sudden, Care Bear just turns around and sprints back to the fence and jumps over. And I'm startled. I'm freaked out. So I turn around and I follow him, run back over the fence, hop it. And we're both in the woods. He's calmed down, and I'm just like, dude, what was that? And he tells me, I was walking and I heard just like a pop in my ear, like a voice, like a yell or something, like a ah! And so he came and ran back over the fence. Or at least that is what I recall him telling me at the time. Anyways, the two of us leave the woods because we're thoroughly freaked out. And then we go over to my cousin's house. And I'm like, cousin, there is some weird, like, trick or treat, because that, I think, was his favorite movie at the time, shit happening in the woods. We should go back tonight. And my cousin is a skeptic, so he was like, yeah, sure, okay, let's go back tonight. And so we do. That night at around 11 o'clock, or closer to midnight, because, that's when the prime hours are, we went back in through the entrance from the town, and we walk 50% of the way, bam, right, maybe in the exact same spot, we hear the music again. And this time it's not coming from the scrap wasteland. This time it's coming from the same direction it was coming from the first night that I encountered it. And so we're there looking at it, and we don't run, because I've heard this twice now. Care Bear's heard it once. My cousin is a bit of a skeptic, so he's still kind of figuring out how he feels. And we talk amongst ourselves, but eventually we arrive at the conclusion that we were definitely going to arrive at. We just lightly turn around, walk a couple of steps, and then run the hell out of there. Because the thing is, we were considering trying to track this music down, but from the 50% mark to like the 75% mark of the woods is just the darkest, dourest path. It has the most trees overhead, blocking out any sort of light. It's dark, it's creepy, it's scary just going there without whatever the hell this music was. So we decided we were definitely not taking that path to try to track it down. So that was night 3, and all of that took place on a weekend. So now, skip ahead a year, actually. So my senior year of high school. And I'm in my senior year, you know. I've got the chip on my shoulder. I'm like, man, I'm going to freaking conquer my town. So I thought, you know what? I've always been scared of those woods, but I'm about to conquer my town, dude. I'm going to go to those woods at night alone. And so I call up my friend Big D one weekend. That's what we're calling him, Big D. And I say, Big D, got any plans for this weekend? And he was like, no, trying to hang. And I was like, yeah, why don't we get the whole crew and just like, go out one night? And so Big D is like, yeah, let me get my crew. He's got a bit of a different crew than the people I usually hang out with. So no Care Bear, no Muscle, no Bubba, no Cousin, but I still like his crew. So I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll go out with Big D's crew. Hell yeah. And he's like, okay, where should I pick you up? And I say, Big D, don't pick me up at my house. Pick me up from the woods. And Big D's like, the wood? You're gonna go into the woods alone? And I was like, yeah, I'm Big D now, Big D. And Big D was like, message received loud and clear. I'm gonna pick the man up from the woods. And so the plans were made. And that night, about, 10 o'clock. Yeah, probably 10 o'clock, because we were planning to go out, late at night and just kind of drive around. But about 10 o'clock, I head to the woods, because that's when Big D was going to pick me up, around 10:15. No, around 10:30, because I still needed time to get it to the 20% mark. So I get to the 20% mark at around 10:15. So I've got 15 minutes before Big D calls me, and then I walk back out of the woods. Probably take around 10 minutes, so we just go out at 10:40. The point is, I'm here at the 20% mark, and I'm sitting there on the benches alone. And to that point in my life, I don't think I had ever been as freaked the hell out as I was. Every single acorn that dropped was, oh my God, what was that? But I was there. I was conquering my town, couldn't move, couldn't cowered out. So I was sitting there. And like 20 minutes pass. No call from Big D. So I called Big D and I'm like, hey Big D, where are you? And he's like, oh yeah, just rounding out the rest of the troops. We'll be there soon. Okay. Hang up. Still in the woods alone, just sitting there. A couple acorns dropped. Whoa, what was that? Just more of that, nothing more, nothing less. Another 20 minutes pass. So I call Big D again. Big D, where the hell are you, man? And Big D tells me, hey, listen, we're at the entrance to the woods from the town. We're kind of hovering out here. The car is parked, but we're not getting out. And I don't know if you should come out because there are like 2 cop cars right outside the entrance to the woods. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, they're 2 cop cars and they have their lights on. And at that moment, I saw what looked like 2 flashlight beams coming directly towards me from the path that leads to the entrance from the town. So 2 policemen with flashlights presumably headed directly my way. And the only thing in my mind was, whatever the hell they're in here looking for, if they see me sitting on this bench alone at like 11 o'clock in the freaking buck-ass woods at night, they're going to think it's me. So I get up and I run. And I run to one of the entrances to the woods from the public park that's beneath it. And I get out on the public park. And the public park is swarmed with policemen with flashlights looking all around. I don't have anything shiny or, reflective on me, and I think I was wearing all black, which would have made getting caught even worse. But I'm looking, but they can't see me because of that. But I can certainly see all of them. So I run back into the woods, and I run all the way around to the 50% mark to where the road is. And I get out on the road. So I'm out of the woods, clear of any suspicion, and I call Big D. And Big D comes and picks me up on the road. And, we didn't really, we shot the shit about it, like, oh, that was pretty weird, but it wasn't a big thing. But despite me getting over it and just moving on and having fun, there was still that itch in the back of my mind, because I was thinking, like, they weren't looking for me in there that night. So whatever they were looking for, the entire time I was sitting there alone, it was in there with me. And that unsettled me. Fast forward a couple of months. So we're getting close to all of us going away for college. And I'm out to dinner with Care Bear and a couple of girls. And, we want to impress the girls. So we tell them about the woods and the weird kind of thing that happened in there. And when I brought up the part where we ran out because Care Bear heard, we ran out of the scrap wasteland because Care Bear heard that loud noise in his ear, he kind of looked at me and he was like, is that what I said? And I was like, yeah, that's what I remember you saying. And he was like, okay. Yeah, I guess that's what I said. And then we just kind of went on, both of us telling the story together. But then after the dinner, Care Bear and I got back into our car. I think it was Care Bear's car. Alone. The girls weren't there. And he said, dude, that's not what happened to me that day. When we got to the scrap wasteland and we were looking at that tree because we thought that's where the music was coming from, when we turned the bend and got to the other side of the tree, I swear to you, I saw something sitting there, cross-legged, rocking back and forth with just greasy, wet, black hair all over it. And Care Bear is like one of my best friends, so he doesn't really bullshit me like that. And even if he did, he would tell me eventually that it was a joke within the night. And he didn't. So, I believe him. And we look at each other and we're thinking, you know what? All of this confusion just means one thing. We do need to go back to those woods tonight to brush up on whatever the hell is going on there. So we go. And we walk in through the town entrance as per usual. We circle the bend, get to the 50% mark, and nothing happened. But we're looking at the road, and across from the road is like this huge, expansive private preserve that is also the woods, but it's like the woods I've been talking about, but times 10. And on the other end, it ends in a beach with some sand dunes and just the open water. And we're looking at the fence to that private preserve across the road. And we're like, nothing's really happening in the regular woods tonight. Let's just go crazy and just hop the fence into the preserve. And we do. So we go to the preserve. The preserve is on the regular when there's no creepy music in the woods. The preserve has the regular woods beat by a freaking country mile when it comes to creepiness. The preserve is dead dark, And like I said, the woods are kind of a central facet of the town. So you get the orange streetlights peeking in and you get the sounds of cars. But the preserve is not. The preserve is out there. In fact, it's so out there that it's not, stereotypically silent. It's actually like constantly awash with the sounds of different animals. So we're just walking through listening to freaking, I don't know what animals calling each other, thinking, oh yeah, we fucked up. But we had to take a circular path to get back to the entrance. Anyways, it was kind of like the regular woods, except much longer. So we take the circular path. The circular path leads us over the sand dunes. And we're walking over the sand dunes looking at the water, a beautiful sight. We didn't want to go down to the beach because that would involve falling off the sand dunes. So we're just walking the path on the sand dunes. And we heard it. For the first time in, a year. I mean, even more than a year, we heard it. We heard the singing. And we're like, no way. So we just follow it, and it leads us back to the entrance to the preserve, hop the fence, avoid the guards, which made it even more exciting. Like 2 things we have to deal with now. But we hop the fence, we go back to the regular woods, because that's where it leads us, and it leads us all the way to the public park, because we're following it now, right? Like, we're curious, we're already scared out of our wits, we're on the private preserve, there's nowhere we can run, so we followed it. And in following it, we discovered that the closer and closer you get to this music, the further and further away it gets. And so we started to test it. So when we got to the public park, we stopped following it, and it just kind of held constant. And, okay, one of the creepier things to note is that this night, the singing was different. It wasn't like the operatic singing, and in fact, it wasn't really anything close to singing at all. It was like popular songs that you would hear on the radio. I'm not going to sing or mimic or play any of them for copyright reasons, but it was popular songs you would hear on the radio. Like that night it was Island in the Sun and a couple of other ones, except they were being played or like sung or whatever or mimicked in a minor key. So it would be like the song, but it would be a distorted, unfamiliar version of it, but just familiar enough to get you interested. So we would walk towards it, we would stop, it would stay constant, and then we would test it even more. We would start to walk away from it, and when we walked away from it, it went back to its old behavior of following us. It was almost as if this thing wasn't hunting us, but it was just curious about us, and it wanted to learn more, just like we wanted to learn more about it. And eventually we just got tired out, because this thing, it would be like the same distance from us constantly. Like we walked towards it, it would be that far away. We walked away from it, it would be that close, but still that far away. So we got tired, and we said screw it, and we went home. A couple of weeks passed. Now we're in August. We're right on the cusp of leaving for college, all of us. And it's Care Bear's birthday. And this birthday was kind of a shitty one, because I was depressed about something, Care Bear was depressed about something. I can't remember exactly what, but we were both high schoolers, so it probably had to do with girls. But yeah, we were just looking at each other and we were like, man, we need some adrenaline. You know what, tonight, let's just get off our asses and go to the freaking woods. Because we were interested. We had this kind of scientific experiment with the music a couple of weeks before, so we wanted to see if we could get it to act up again. So that night, around 11:30 or whatever, happy birthday to Care Bear, we got up and we headed to the entrance to the woods from the town. And we get there, and we take 2 steps into the woods, and I had, I was already depressed, but I had like a horrid feeling 2 steps in. It was like my stomach just dropped. And I looked at Care Bear and I was like, man, I feel awful. And he was like, yeah, dude, me too. Like, I feel so much worse just coming into the woods. It was really like in scuba diving, they have a term, thermocline, which is when you pass a certain point and the temperature just dramatically drops. It was like that, except with like sadness and depression and fear. And so we're like, I want to keep going, you know, we came here for the fun. And so we take a couple of more steps, and the woods on this specific night were looking like dark as hell. I don't know what it was, the orange street lights were blocked out that night, but the path looked so dark. So we took a couple of more steps in, but we're anxious, we're hesitant. We took a couple more steps in, like 30 steps into the woods. From the center of the woods, we hear a horrible noise. It sounds like the most pain-induced moan I had ever heard in my entire life. Like, I'm gonna try to do it here. I'll probably add a VFX over it, or SFX, because it's gonna sound like a stereotypical ghost sound effect. It was just like, it was just, for as like hockey, cheesy, and stereotypical as that sounded, this was like one of the worst things I've ever heard in my life. It sounded like immense pain, but the person couldn't decide whether or not they enjoyed it. It was just weird. And me and Care Bear looked at each other and we were like, that's it, we're out. Because that gave me an awful feeling. And that was the last time I went into the woods at night. But it wasn't the last time I went into the woods, period. Because a couple of days after that, I was dog sitting for a family dog. And now this is like I think I might have been leaving for college in like a couple of days. So it was the last spare few days in my hometown. And the dog is a German Shepherd, so it's basically a freaking wolf. And it was one day that I had to dog sit for it. But it's a German Shepherd, it needs a place to walk, and the only place around that a big freaking shambling ass animal like that could walk was, of course, the woods. So I, a bit hesitantly, took the dog for a walk in the woods that day. So I mentioned the inner paths in the woods, and I mentioned the center. This center is interesting because it was kind of a fixture for us. We called it the pit. And that was because when we were younger, the town was dumping a bunch of sand in there. I don't know why. So we called it the sand pit. But then the town, like, over time, just gradually started to dump just shit in there. Like, just random stuff, like mildew, like old compost. And it started to smell awful. So it went from the sand pit to the pit. And even when it was the sand pit, I never liked the pit. I didn't like going there. I never went there at night. And when it started to smell horrible, it just turned me off from it even more. The place just gave me a bad vibe. But German Shepherd is strong. And when you're walking a full-grown German Shepherd, wherever the German Shepherd wants to walk, you're going. And it pulled me into the pit. And it's unpleasant because not only do I dislike the place, but you have to walk through a bunch of shrubbery to get there. There's not like a really established path. It's from the inner paths, some of which are nice, but some of which are more what you would call homebrew paths. And so the German Shepherd pulls me in, and I'm standing there in the pit with it. And we're looking at just this like dead area of the woods that's just got all this crap laid all over it. And we see something. We see a little thing with what I would describe as a reddish color, about the size of a fox. But it was hopping on its hind legs, and its front arms were like close. I couldn't really see them, but they looked like they were close up to the body, like kind of like a T-Rex arm. And it was hopping. It had the physicality of like a kangaroo, but like I was from the South, but the American South, so like we're not that far south. It definitely wasn't a kangaroo, and it was too small, and it was weird. It was like it had this musculature to it, and it was hopping, and it was making this noise, this awful noise, like it was like it was laughing, but it couldn't get the laughs out because it had holes in its lungs or something. I don't know. That's just the way I thought of it. So me and the German Shepherd just watched this little, like, impish thing hop across the pit and then disappear into the tree line on the other side. This German Shepherd, if it sees a squirrel, it's all out war. I'm not unconvinced that it wouldn't, like, chase a fly throughout the entire freaking state. It is the most finicky, anxious. If it sees an animal, barking after it, just chasing it. It was looking at this thing, stone silent, and it was standing perfectly still. And again, I had an itch, but it was worse. Because, like, at the back of my mind, there was this itch, and it's crazy. You're going to think I'm crazy, but I had this feeling because I was just looking at this creature's hind legs and it was hopping away from me, that I really didn't want it to turn around and look at me, because I thought if it did look at me, it would have a face that was, like, human-like. And I was, like, convinced in the back of my mind when I was looking at this creature that if it turned around and looked at me, its face would look exactly the same as mine.
Has anyone else encountered people that didn't seem to actually be people? I was wondering if anyone else has had any experiences with people that didn't quite seem to be people, like there was something off about them. I had an experience some time ago that I've never been able to shake off. So this happened in Charleston, South Carolina around Christmas of 2017. I used to work at a popular coffee shop that was inside of a popular big box retail store. One day around Christmas time, I had two guests that struck me as odd immediately. They were pale Caucasian women, probably mid-20s, that both looked nearly identical, but one was about a head taller than the other. They had the exact same haircut, very straight platinum blonde bowl-like cuts. Their faces were quite round, and their eyes were a noticeably bright hazel color and appeared quite large, but not in like a disproportionate gray alien kind of way. They both also had a fairly odd stiff gait, as though they had a board strapped to their back. They sort of shuffled their feet around when they walked. They both also had an oversized sweater on, and I noticed later the shorter one had theirs on backwards. The weird part was their behavior. When they first walked in, the shorter one looked around the store as if they've never been in one. Her overall demeanor was somewhat childlike. Like a good customer service rep, I welcomed them in and told them to ask me if they had any questions. The short girl looked to the taller as if for approval. She then slowly nodded her head towards me, mouth slightly agape, and then attempted a hand wave. Instead of waving at the wrist like most people, she waves with her forearm, palm flat and straight in a sort of robotic windshield wiper-like motion. She then turns to the taller one, who gives her an encouraging nod. They proceed to walk around the cafe looking at the cups and merchandise. The short girl would often point all around the store and seem to be asking the taller one questions, almost as if this was a guided tour of sorts. Now, obviously, I'm no linguist, but my city is a fairly popular tourist destination, and I've met foreigners from all over the globe. Even if I don't recognize a specific language, I can usually estimate roundabout where it may come from, whether it's Germanic, Slavic, Mid-Eastern, or etc. in origin. But the language they spoke to each other was very strange, and not like one I've ever heard. Imagine if you mixed Simlish with Baby Babble and sped it up. Lots of gaga, blah blah, and ooh sounds. They continued on, checking out the merchandise and going on what seemed to be a Q&A session. They would often open up cups and look inside, grab bags of beans and squeeze and shake them. At one point, the shorter one took apart a French press and the taller one seemed to try to explain what it was for. This went on for about another 10 minutes or so, when the short one picked out a studded cup to purchase. She shuffles her way to the POS and puts the cup on the counter, frequently looking towards her friend as if looking for reassurance, who again does a simple nod in encouragement. She then looks towards me and attempts to smile, which was just baring her perfectly straight white top teeth as though she were biting her bottom lip and slowly nodding, not saying a word. It was here that I noticed her sweater was on backwards, the tag sticking out in front of her neck. Now that I had a good look, I will say that she was oddly attractive, but there was something about her appearance that gave me the uncanny valley vibe. I couldn't tell you exactly what it was. I will say I don't recall them ever blinking. I scanned the cup and went on the typical checkout spiel to which there was no reply. When it was time to pay, she pulled out a silver credit card that had no markings whatsoever. No logos, no numbers, no name. Just blank plastic with a chip. She then looks back over to the taller one and says something, who then comes over and finishes the transaction for her, showing her as though it was a teaching moment. I hand her the cup and she once again slowly nods her head, mouth ajar, and does her windshield wiper wave. They then shuffle their way out of the cafe into the rest of the store, and I never saw them again.
I consider this to have been kind of an omen, and right off the bat I'll just tell you why. At the end of the night this story took place, my friend and I had to break into a classmate's house to make sure that they didn't end their own life through an overdose. They didn't, but that aside, let's go back to the beginning. Where I grew up in my senior year of high school, it was common for random guys to call each other at 1 or 2 in the morning, even if we weren't particularly friendly, and invite each other to drive out to the city and get halal from food carts. We would just call and ask, "Halal?" And you pretty much had to say yes, otherwise you were kicked out of the circuit. On this particular night, it was a close friend of mine who called and asked, so I definitely said yes. We stopped at CVS on the way into the city because I wanted to get an ice cream. I went in and started looking around, and at some point I entered an odd trance where I kept checking the same shelves and just couldn't find the ice cream, no matter where I looked. The buzzing that you would normally expect in a CVS or pharmacy and the shuffling of people's feet was also something that seemed tuned out for me, and I noticed a lack of any other customers in the store. And although I could see the employees through my peripheral vision, I couldn't really clock the fact that they were there. But eventually, I did notice one other person. Far behind me in the aisle I was in, there was a massive man, about 6'5" and heavy-set, wearing a long black coat. He was bald, and it looked like, if I had to give it my best guess, he was Korean, but his facial features were very distinct. I'd never seen anything like it. He was starkly pale, with a wide, thick-lipped, closed smile and sunken eyes, and his expression was so placid and unmoving that his whole face looked like some kind of theater mask. His head was slowly moving side to side as his feet shuffled from left to right, but his eyes never left me as he moved. I turned back around, not frightened yet, but definitely having noticed how unique he looked. Then I moved on, still looking for the ice cream. In the next aisle over, when I looked behind me again, the black-coated man was there, this time a little closer, still looking at me and shaking his head side to side. And the rest of my search for the ice cream went on like this, kind of like an odd dance between me and this man. Every new aisle I would look behind, and he would be closer. I still felt like I was in a trance, not completely in control of my actions, but gradually getting more scared and more aware as I moved through the store. Finally, I found a vanilla ice cream sandwich in the freezer that should have been obvious to me the minute I walked through the doors, and I snapped out of it. Without looking behind me, I speed-walked towards the self-checkout and paid. I still wasn't cognizant of any other customers in the store, and no employees had offered to help me yet. When I bagged my sandwich, I tilted my head over my shoulder and almost screamed. The man was right there, towering over me. He had never stopped moving his head back and forth the whole time he had been following me, and still he was staring directly at me. He didn't seem malicious, though. The look in his eyes was just deeply curious, like a child trying to figure out a simple puzzle. I ran out of the CVS and jumped in my friend's car. From the car window, I couldn't see the man through the glass front door next to the self-checkout I was just at anymore. I told my friend to wait for a little bit after telling him the story, and we waited. For 15 minutes we waited there, and we never saw that man leave the store.